You get old, your muscles get weak, and that is why standing up from a chair gets harder. Simple. Everybody knows it. Your grandmother knows it, your doctor knows it, you know it. The muscle wears down like the tread on a tire, and one day the thing that used to be free starts costing you a grunt and a hand on the armrest. That is the whole story. Case closed. Except it is not. And I am going to prove to you it is not. Because hiding underneath that comfortable little story is one of the prettiest problems in all of mechanics. A problem your body has been solving perfectly, silently, 100 times a day for your whole life, without ever telling you it was doing it. So let me start not with an argument but with a number, and you tell me whether the tidy story survives it. Take a frail old person, someone who really struggles to get out of a chair. Wire them up the way the biomechanics people do, all the sensors and the force plates, and measure exactly how hard their leg muscles are pulling at the hardest instant of standing up. In the careful studies, the answer comes back around 97%. 97% of the absolute maximum that leg can produce, spent on standing up out of a chair. Not running for a bus. Not hoisting a suitcase. Standing up. There is almost nothing left in the tank. No reserve for a wobble, for a dog crossing the floor, for a gust through an open door. Now take a young person, same chair, same motion, and they are spending a modest slice of what they have. Same chair, same motion. Completely different world. So something in that motion is eating almost the entire budget of an old leg while barely denting a young one, and the muscle got weaker does not begin to tell you what. But let me be fair to the ordinary story first, because it is not stupid. It is built on something you can actually see. Watch a person across the decades, and yes, the muscle does shrink. The arm that filled a shirt sleeve at 25 is thinner at 75. There is a real thing here. The doctors call it sarcopenia, which is just Greek dressed up to mean loss of flesh, loss of muscle. It is measurable, it is honest, it happens to everybody, and it lines up with what your own eyes tell you. The body gets a little smaller, a little softer, and the jaw lids get a little tighter. So of course you reach for it. Of course you say, the muscle shrank, that is why the chair got hard. It fits. It feels obvious. And when something feels that obvious, we usually stop thinking, which is exactly the moment a physicist ought to start. So let us do the thing that spoils a good obvious story. Let us put a number on it. How fast does the muscle actually shrink? You go to the measurements, the careful ones where they track people across the years, and the muscle mass comes off at something like 0.5% a year in men. In women a little less, closer to 0.4% a year. Sit with that a moment. 0.5% a year. That is a slow leak. That is the slowest, most patient erosion you can imagine. Let me do the arithmetic right out in the open, because arithmetic is honest in a way that feeling never is. Say you start losing at 40 and you are complaining about the chair at 70. 30 years, 0.5% a year, that is about 15% of the muscle gone. 15%. Now 15% is not nothing. I would not tell you it is nothing. But think about what 15% means. It means you are carrying about 85% of the muscle you had. If getting out of a chair at 40 cost you, let us say, half of what your legs could do, then losing 15% of the muscle should not turn that into a struggle. You would still have a comfortable margin. The chair should get slightly harder, the way a familiar hill gets slightly steeper. It should not turn into the daily ordeal that it becomes for so many people. The shrinkage is real, but it is too slow and too small to be the villain. The arithmetic does not add up. When the arithmetic does not add up, you have not explained the thing. You have only named it and walked away. So there is our first crack in the story, and it is a bad one, because it is a crack in the size of the effect. The cause everyone points to is a gentle slope, and the thing we are trying to explain is a cliff. You do not explain a cliff with a gentle slope. Something else is going on, something the shrinking muscle picture cannot see, and to find it, we have to stop staring at the muscle and start staring at the motion. Because here is what the ordinary story never asks. What actually is standing up? We treat it like a strength test, like a little private weightlifting contest between you and the chair where the strongest person wins and the weak person struggles. But that is the wrong picture entirely. Standing up is not mainly a strength problem, it is a balance and timing problem dressed up as a strength problem. It is torque and momentum, and it is a genuinely hard piece of mechanics that you happen to be extremely good at. Let me show you. Sit down really wherever you are and try to stand up without leaning forward at all. Keep your back flat against the chair, your shoulders back, and try to rise straight up like an elevator. You cannot do it. You are pinned. It is not that it is hard, it is that it is impossible, and not because you are weak. The strongest young athlete in the world, back flat against the seat, cannot rise straight up either. And that tells you the difficulty is not living in the muscle, it is living in the geometry. Here is the geometry. Your body has a center of mass, a single balance point where all your weight effectively acts. When you are sitting, that point is somewhere back around your belly, and crucially, it is sitting behind your feet, back over the seat. Now to stand, you have to get your weight up and over your feet, because your feet are the only thing you get to push against the ground with. Your feet are your base. Until your balance point is stacked up above that base, the floor simply cannot hold you up there. You would just topple back down into the chair. So before you can rise a single inch, you have a problem to solve. You have to move your center of mass forward, out over your feet, and only then can it go up. And that is exactly what the lean is. That fold at the hips that you never think about, that little bow toward your knees every time you get up, that is you solving the geometry. You are shipping your weight forward across the gap until it hangs over your feet. The biomechanics people have measured this dance in young adults, frame by frame with the motion capture, and it is a lovely thing. In that critical stretch just before the hips leave the seat, the center of mass travels forward about 109 millimeters, call it 4 inches, and it rises only about 74 millimeters, call it 3 inches. Forward first, then up. And the whole performance, from still sitting to standing tall, takes on average about 1 6/10 of a second. Under 2 seconds. You do this complicated forward then up maneuver in less time than it takes to say the word biomechanics, and you never knew you were doing it. Now watch closely, because here is the part that turns standing up from a strength trick into a real piece of physics. That forward lean is not just about getting your weight over your feet. It is about building momentum. When you fold forward, your upper body, your head, and your trunk, all that mass starts moving. It picks up horizontal speed. Now you have a moving mass, and a moving mass has momentum, and momentum is a thing you can borrow, redirect, spend. At the instant your rear leaves the seat, your body performs a beautiful conversion. It takes that forward-going momentum of the lean and it turns it upward into the rise. The horizontal swing becomes the vertical launch. You have felt this and never named it. Think of an old person who cannot get out of a soft chair, and what do they do without being taught? They rock. Once, twice, and then up on the third go. They are not being fussy. They are being brilliant engineers. Each rock is a deposit of momentum, and on the last one they cash it all in at the right instant and let the swing throw them upward. It is precisely the same trick a high jumper uses in the approach run, or a kid pumping a swing to go higher. You gather motion in one direction and you spend it in another. Standing up is a launch. It is a controlled little throw of your own body, timed to the split second, and the seat becomes a launch pad you have to leave before your legs alone would ever agree to lift you. So look at what has happened to our tidy story. We started with the muscle got weak, and we have discovered that standing up is not simply a matter of muscle at all. It is a matter of getting a heavy, wobbling mass moving in the right direction at the right moment and converting one kind of motion into another, all in about a second and a half on a base of support the size of 2 feet. That is not a weightlifting contest. That is a juggling act. And once you see it as a juggling act, you start to suspect the real reason it fails is not that the juggler got weaker. It is that the juggler got slower. But hold that thought, because before we rebuild the story properly, we have to be honest about how completely the old one has just fallen apart. So let us be honest, all the way honest. When somebody tells you the muscle got weak, Ask them a simple question. Weak how? Because a muscle can fail you in more than one way, and most people have only ever pictured one of them. They picture a muscle that got smaller. And yes, that happens. The meat on your bones does thin out with the years. In men, the muscle mass drains away at something like 0.47% a year. In women, a touch slower, about 0.37% a year. Take those numbers and let them run. Over a decade, that is not even 5%. Over 3 decades, maybe 15% smaller. That is real, but it is gentle. It is a slow tide going out. It cannot possibly explain a man of 70 who could rise from that armchair with a grunt last spring and this spring cannot rise from it at all. The arithmetic is too polite. Something else is doing the damage, and it is doing it faster. Here is the crack that splits the whole thing open. The strength does not fade at the same rate as the size. It falls off a cliff by comparison. By the time a man is around 75, his strength is dropping something like 3 to 4% every single year. For women, roughly 2.5 to 3% a year. Set that beside the mass loss and stare at it. The muscle is shrinking at under 0.5% a year, but the strength is leaving at 3 or 4% a year. The strength is walking out the door somewhere between 2 and 5 times faster than the muscle itself. So the picture of a slowly deflating balloon is simply wrong. It is more like a rope that keeps its thickness while the fibers inside quietly rot. It looks fine. It is not fine. The scientists gave this its own name, because it deserved one. They called the shrinking of the muscle sarcopenia, poverty of the flesh. But this other thing, the strength draining out faster than the size, they called dynapenia. Poverty of strength. And that word is the hinge of our whole story, because it tells you the thing you lose is not mainly meat. It is capability. You can have almost the same muscle you had at 50 and still have lost a shocking share of what that muscle can actually do. The outside lies to you. The mirror says you are only a little smaller. The chair tells the truth. Now watch me push even harder, because we are not at the bottom yet. Strength, the way a scientist measures it, is usually the most force you can produce when you have all the time in the world. Push against a wall as hard as you can. Take a second, take 2 seconds, really lean into it. That is strength. But go back to that instant before liftoff, that controlled little throw of the torso, and ask yourself how much time the body actually gets. The whole affair, sit to stand, is over in about 1.5 seconds. The launch itself, the real explosion, is a fraction of that. You do not have 2 seconds to build your maximum force. You have a blink. And force delivered in a blink is a different animal. Force times how fast you deliver it, that is power. And power, it turns out, is what fails first. Think of it in the kitchen. Strength is how heavy a jar you can eventually get the lid off given all afternoon. Power is whether you can swat a fly. An old strong man and a young strong man might both, in the end, budge the same stubborn jar. But ask them both to snap their hand out and catch a falling glass, and you will see the years in an instant. The falling glass does not wait. Neither does your center of mass once you have thrown it forward off that seat. If the upward push does not arrive fast, right now in that sliver of time, the momentum you built dies, your hips settle back into the cushion, and you have to start the whole throw over again. You have all seen it, the little rock forward that does not quite make it. The second try. The third. And here is the cruelty of the arithmetic. Power fades even faster than strength does. If strength is leaving at something like 2% a year, and mass at only about 1% a year, then power, the force times speed, the swat the fly quantity, is draining at closer to 3% a year. Some people have started calling that powerpenia. Poverty of quickness. Line the 3 up and you see a staircase going down. Mass leaves slowest. Strength leaves faster. Power leaves fastest of all. And standing up, that ballistic little launch leans hardest on the very quality that is disappearing quickest. Of course it gets hard. We were measuring the wrong thing the whole time. We kept weighing the muscle when we should have been timing it. I do not want you to take my word for this, so let me give you the number that made me sit up. Somebody took a room full of older people, 60 up to 82 years old, and had them stand up from a chair over and over, counting how many they could do in 30 seconds. Then they asked the honest question. Of everything you could measure about these people, what best predicts how many stands they get? Was it their raw knee strength, the how hard can you push number? No. The single best predictor was the peak upward momentum they could generate in the rise. The speed of the launch, essentially. That one quantity accounted for better than a third of all the difference between people, more than static strength did on its own. The quickness mattered more than the might. There it is, measured in black and white. The juggler is not failing because he got weaker, he is failing because he got slower, and slowness is exactly what this trick cannot survive. Now let me show you where this goes when it gets bad, because there is a number here that ought to frighten you a little, and I mean it to. Go back to the young person standing up. When they rise from an ordinary chair, they are using only a modest slice of what their legs can do. They have margin. They have change in their pockets. If the chair were lower, or the floor slick, or they had to catch themselves, there is plenty in reserve. Now look at a frail older person rising from the lowest seat they can still manage. The old measurements found that such a person can be using something like 97% of the absolute maximum their knee muscles can produce. 97%. Just to stand up. Just to do the most ordinary thing a body does a dozen times a day. There is no reserve left. There is no change in the pocket. They are redlining the engine to climb out of a chair, and anything that asks for 1% more, a soft cushion, a moment of dizziness, a shove, has nowhere to come from. And this is exactly why the low seats are the villains. It is not your imagination that the couch is worse than the kitchen chair, and the car seat worse than the couch, and that certain low seats in the house are the hardest of all. The physics is pitiless and simple. The lower the seat, the farther your center of mass has to travel up and over your feet, and the more twisting force your knees have to make to get you there. That demand climbs steadily as the seat drops. So a healthy young person feels the couch as merely a little lazier than a chair. But the person already living at 97% of maximum feels the couch as a wall. The same lost inch of seat height that cost you nothing costs them the whole trip. That is why the first thing to become impossible is never the tall bar stool. It is always the low, soft, friendly-looking seat that swallows you. You want to see the decline with your own eyes, without a laboratory? You need a chair and a way to count to 30. That is the entire instrument. Sit, stand, arms folded so the legs do the honest work, and count how many full cycles you finish in 30 seconds. That humble stopwatch test turns the whole invisible collapse into a single number, and the numbers do not comfort you. Healthy people in their middle 50s knock out something like 22 of them in 30 seconds. Move to the frailer older folks, the ones already sliding, and it falls to around 15. And the frail, the ones in real trouble, near their mid-80s, manage about 6. 6. From 22 down to 6. Nearly a fourfold collapse, and every step of it statistically solid, not noise. One chair, 1/2 minute, and you have read the state of a person's engine more truthfully than any glance in a mirror ever could. And it is not merely a curiosity, this number, because it points straight at the thing everyone is really afraid of. The legs that cannot lift you out of a chair are the same legs that cannot catch you when you stumble. When the knee muscles get weak, the odds of falling climb, and not by a hair. The weakest group carried something like 3 times the odds of a fall compared to the strong. The launch and the save are the same muscles doing the same fast, forceful job, and when the quickness goes, both go together. So this little chair test is quietly measuring how close you are standing to the edge of the floor. So hold where we are now, because we have torn the old story down to the studs and we are most of the way to building the true one back up. It was never simply that the muscle got small. It is that the strength drains faster than the size, and the power, the quickness, drains faster still, and the one movement we do a dozen times a day happens to demand exactly that vanishing quickness launched in a blink on a base the size of 2 feet with the reserve tank running toward empty. That is the machine, and that is its failure. But a clever body does not just sit there and accept the verdict. It fights back. It cheats. And how it cheats, the quiet tricks it invents when the power runs low, is where this gets truly beautiful. So watch an older person get up, really watch, and you will see the cheating in slow motion, and it is not clumsiness, it is genius. The first thing they do is lean farther forward than they used to. A young person tips the trunk a little and goes. The older body falls down deep, nose out toward the knees, almost as if bowing to the floor. Why? Because leaning forward is free. Gravity does that pull for nothing. The farther you tip the chest, the more of your weight you throw out ahead, and the sooner your center of gravity crosses over your feet, and remember, once it is over your feet, you are allowed to rise. So the body has discovered, without a lecture, without a single equation, that if it cannot supply as much upward power as it used to, it can borrow help from geometry. It moves the launch point closer. It shortens the distance the weak engine has to cover. And there is a second trick sitting right next to the first. Watch the timing. The young launch is one smooth swoop. A blink, done. The older launch has a little hitch in it. A pause at the bottom, a gather, like a diver bouncing once on the board before the jump. That pause is not hesitation. It is the body collecting itself, rocking, building what small momentum it can, because it knows on some deep wordless level that a running start is worth more than a standing one. If you cannot push hard, push early, and let the swing of your own upper body do part of the lifting. They are stretching that flexion momentum phase out, milking it, squeezing every drop of horizontal motion they can wring out of the lean, so that when the hips finally leave the seat there is at least some borrowed speed already flowing upward. Now here is the price of all this cleverness, and it is a real price. When you lean way out over your toes to save your knees, you have put your weight far forward on a very small platform. You are, for a fraction of a second, tipping toward a fall on purpose and then catching yourself. So the older body also does something you can see if you look for it. It sways. It wobbles. There is more drift, more little corrections at the ankle and the hip, more of that faint trembling search for balance. And underneath, in the muscles themselves, something wasteful is happening. In a smooth young movement, the muscle that lifts you fires, and the muscle that would fight it stays quiet. In the older movement, both fire at once. The pusher and the brake press against each other. We call that co-activation. And it is the body clamping down for safety, stiffening the joint so it will not buckle. It is the difference between a confident stride and walking on ice. The stiffening keeps you from falling, but it eats power. You are spending force just to hold yourself steady, force that a younger body never had to spend, and that force comes straight out of the same shrinking budget that was already running low. So the very strategy that saves the movement also taxes it. The cheat has a cost. And this is why the armrest is not a weakness. The armrest is a solution. When you drop your hand onto that armrest and push, you have quietly opened up a second engine. You have added a whole new path for force, straight down through the arm and the shoulder, bypassing the overtaxed knees entirely. A person who cannot rise from a flat bench can often float right up out of a chair with arms, because the arms are handing the legs alone. It is the same instinct as the lean and the rock, just made of muscle and wood instead of geometry and timing. The body is a stubborn engineer. Take away one root and it will find another, and it will find it without you ever deciding a thing. Now stand all the way back and look at the whole picture, because it finally hangs together. Remember where the demand comes from. The torque you need to rise climbs steadily as the seat drops lower. A tall stool asks almost nothing. A kitchen chair asks more. A soft couch, a car seat, a low toilet, those ask the most of all, because from down there your knees are folded tight and the leverage is against you the whole way up. So the low soft seats are exactly where the failing engine meets the steepest hill. That is not bad luck. That is physics picking the worst possible spot to test you, and it tests you there first, years before a firm chair ever gives you trouble. Put it all in one line and you have the true story, the one we built back up from the studs. It was never that the muscle merely got small. The size drifts down slowly, less than 0.5% a year, far too gentle to explain the grunt and the struggle. The strength drains 2 to 5 times faster than the size. And the power, the quickness, the ability to make force in a hurry drains faster still. And standing up is a fast movement. It is ballistic. It is a launch in a blink, off a base the size of 2 feet, and it demands precisely the quickness that leaves first. That is why the reserve tank runs toward empty right where you need it most. The impaired and the frail end up spending nearly the whole of their strength, 97% of it in one careful study, just to rise from the lowest chair they can still manage. There is almost nothing left over. No margin. And when there is no margin, a stumble has nowhere to borrow from, and a stumble becomes a fall. The weak knee is not just an inconvenience. Measured honestly, low strength in the front of the thigh roughly triples the odds that a person goes down. The chair is connected to the floor by a very short rope, so think about what that ordinary chair really is. You have one in your kitchen, you have one at your desk, you have sat in 10,000 of them without a thought, and all along it was giving you an examination. Every time you rose, it asked, quietly, how much force can you still make, and how fast can you make it, and can you throw your weight forward and catch the falling and convert it upward before your knees give out. For most of your life you passed without noticing there was a test. The grade was invisible because you had margin to spare. And then, one ordinary afternoon, decades in, you push up out of a low, soft seat, and for the very first time the chair hands back a grade you can feel. Not because you suddenly became old. Because a slow subtraction that had been running the whole time finally crossed the line where you could sense it. There is something almost tender in that. The hardest exam you will ever take is the one you sit down for a dozen times a day, and the only way to keep passing it is to keep taking it. The chair is patient, the chair is honest, and the chair is always quietly waiting to see whether you can still stand.